ready for a deep dive. Today, we're going way back to 3100 BCE.
Wow, 3100 BCE. Okay.
Yeah, so think Egypt, but not the Egypt,
Yeah.
with the pyramids and the pharaohs as we think of it.
Okay, yeah.
This is pre-unified Egypt.
Right.
So picture the Nile, right? The lifeblood of this whole region.
Yeah.
But instead of one unified kingdom, you've got,
Two.
yeah, Upper and Lower Egypt, each vying for control.
And it wasn't just about, like, who's got the most land. You had these two distinct cultures, belief systems, everything, all trying to, like, coexist along this vital waterway.
It's almost like they were two totally separate worlds,
Yeah.
right? Forced to share the same backyard.
Exactly. And that's where a certain King Narmer enters the picture.
Yeah.
He's the one who really saw the bigger picture.
He understood that a divided Egypt, well, just couldn't reach its full potential.
And that's what makes his story, I think, so fascinating from a leadership perspective. You know, this wasn't just some power grab. He wasn't just out to conquer. This was about creating something that would last.
Okay, so let's break this down, because Narmer clearly had a long-term vision here.
Right.
He wasn't content with just being another pharaoh. He wanted to create a legacy, united Egypt.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there had been other attempts at unification before him, and they all failed.
Right.
So what was it about Narmer's approach that was different?
I think he understood something really fundamental about leadership. He understood the power of symbolism, of weaving a compelling narrative.
Oh, okay.
And we see this so clearly in one of the most iconic artifacts from his reign, the Narmer palette.
Now, for those of our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with this particular artifact.
Yeah, it's not just some ancient Egyptian makeup kit.
No.
No, this is an engraved stone slab, and it depicts Narmer. But here's the thing. He's wearing two crowns.
Two crowns.
Two crowns. The white crown of Upper Egypt and, wait for it, the red crown of Lower Egypt.
Oh, wow. He's making a statement.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
He's basically saying, look, I'm not just the king of one part of Egypt. I am the king of all of Egypt.
It's such a powerful image, even today.
It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of, like, a CEO rebranding a company after a major merger,
Yeah.
It's about sending a message, creating a shared visual identity. And it worked. He gave his people who had always seen themselves as separate, a reason to see themselves as one.
And that idea, that shared identity, it's something we see everywhere today. You think about sports teams, they have their logos, their colors, it unites the fans. Countries have national symbols. It fosters patriotism.
Oh, for sure.
It's like this deep-seated human need to belong to something bigger than ourselves.
It's harnessing that tribal instinct, right? But here's the thing about Narmer. He didn't just stop at symbols. He understood that true unification, well, it wasn't about just like slapping two crowns together and calling it a day. He needed to find a way to actually integrate the cultures of Upper and Lower Egypt, to respect their differences while still creating this unified state.
So it wasn't about like one culture absorbing the other one. It was about blending them together, creating something new.
Right. And that's where we really start to see the genius of Narmer's approach.
Okay, so tell me more about that. How did he actually go about, this cultural integration? Like what specific actions did he take?
Well, I think a great example of this is the merging of the two crowns into the Shant double crown. It became the symbol of this new unified Egypt, a powerful reminder that two distinct identities had come together as one.
It's like taking two separate ingredients and creating this whole new flavor.
Yes.
And that's just the beginning of his story. But before we get into all those details, I think it's important to take a step back and really appreciate how revolutionary his thinking was, and how relevant it still is today,
It really is remarkable when you think about it. Like, imagine being Narmer, right?
Yeah.
The weight of all those expectations. I mean, the fate of Egypt rested on his shoulders.
It's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, what drove him? What was his primary motivation?
Right. Was it just like pure ambition, or was there something more to it? Something deeper.
Right. And unfortunately, we can't, hop in a time machine and ask him directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But what we can do is we can look at the historical context. Remember, we were talking about the Nile, how it was like the lifeblood of this whole region.
Right.
Control of the Nile meant control of, well, everything: agriculture, trade, even their belief systems. It was everything.
Yeah, it was crucial for their very survival.
Exactly. And so now imagine all the conflict that must have been going on, right? Constant struggles over water rights, over trade routes, over the most fertile land. And these weren't just like minor squabbles. These were major drains on their resources.
Yeah, it'd be incredibly destabilizing.
Exactly. It was holding Egypt back.
Okay, so you're thinking that Narmer's his drive to unify, it wasn't just about him wanting more power. It was about ensuring the long-term survival of Egypt, of his people.
I think that's a big part of it. He saw the bigger picture. He understood that a divided Egypt, well, they'd always be vulnerable. They'd be wasting precious resources, fighting amongst themselves, instead of, uniting and becoming stronger as a whole.
He's like the OG unifier.
Right. And that kind of leadership, it takes a certain amount of empathy, don't you think, to look beyond your own ambitions and really see the needs of the people that you're leading.
Oh, absolutely. It's that whole concept of servant leadership, right, which we've talked about a lot on the show.
Yeah.
It's this idea that a true leader sees themselves as serving the needs of their people.
Exactly. And so Narmer's unification, it's not just some footnote in a history book. This was a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about bringing these two kingdoms together. It was about building a foundation for something that could last.
Something sustainable.
Something sustainable, yeah. And that brings us to like the next layer of Narmer's, his genius, I think.
Like how he went beyond all the grand gestures and he really focused on the practical, like day-to-day details of running a unified kingdom.
Exactly. It wasn't enough to just wear the double crown and make speeches about unity. He had to build systems.
Right. He had to make it real.
He had to make it real. He had to create the infrastructure that would actually hold this new Egypt together.
So let's talk about that infrastructure. Like what were some of the specific things that he did? What were some of these systems that he put in place to make sure that this newly unified kingdom, that it didn't just, crumble back into two separate pieces?
Well, one of the most important things he did was to establish a centralized bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And I think we forget how revolutionary that was, right?
Yeah.
Because before unification, you had two separate systems of government. You had two sets of laws, two of everything.
Oh, yeah. It'd be a mess trying to combine all of that.
Yeah. It'd be chaos. So to create a truly, truly unified state, you need a system that could administer this vast territory fairly efficiently.
Yeah, it's like taking two totally different companies,
Yeah.
right? And trying to merge them together seamlessly into this one smoothly functioning organization.
Right. And that's no small feat.
That's not easy. That
Yeah.
takes some serious organizational skills.
Yeah. And did he, I have to imagine there was pushback. When you're making such drastic changes, people don't always love change.
Oh, absolutely. There were challenges. You're trying to integrate these two different bureaucracies, each with its own way of doing things. And while we don't have, these detailed records of every single thing that happened, you can bet there were power struggles.
Oh.
There were officials who were used to the old ways. They were resistant to change. There might have even been outright rebellions he had to quell. We don't know. We don't have all the juicy details.
Man, I wish we had those records. Right. Imagine. But it's safe to assume it wasn't all smooth sailing.
No, definitely not. So how did he manage all of that? What strategies did he use to overcome those challenges?
Mm-hmm.
To solidify his rule. It's got to be one of the biggest challenges for any leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting people on board with change.
Oh, 100%. It's way easier to just stick with what even if it's, not really working.
Right.
And especially when it's being imposed on you by some outsider.
Yeah.
Even if that outsider is, now the king, it's tough. But Narmer, he seemed to understand on a fundamental level that true power, it doesn't come from just forcing people to do what you want. It comes from creating systems that actually work. Systems that people will buy into,
So how do you do that? How do you go from conquering to actually governing? Give us the ancient Egyptian version of change management for dummies here.
Well, he didn't just, barge in and say, all right, everybody, forget everything you knew before. We're doing things my way now.
Right.
He was actually quite clever about it. He took elements of both Upper and Lower Egypt's administrative practices and kind of wove them together. He created this hybrid system.
Oh, interesting.
So it felt familiar enough to both sides,
So he's striking that balance, right, between Like you need to innovate, you need to create something new, but you also don't want to completely alienate people by making them throw out everything they know.
Exactly. It's like walking a tightrope. And
Oh,
one of the things he did that I think is really interesting, really smart, is he standardized weights and measures.
weights and measures.
Yeah, and it sounds kind of small, right? When you say it like that.
Yeah.
But think about it. When you have standardized weights and measures, it means that trade is fair.
Oh, oh yeah.
It prevents disputes, and it creates this sense of like economic unity.
It's like he's laying the groundwork for everyone to be on the same page economically.
Yes.
Which, yeah, it's good for everybody in the long run if everybody's like playing by the same rules.
Right, exactly. And remember, this is, we're talking about a time when economies were really starting to take off. So it's not just about fairness at this point. It's about like literally creating the conditions for growth, for prosperity. And that helps to, keep things stable. It helps to prevent future conflicts.
It's amazing how these like little details, right?
Right.
They seem so small,
Yeah.
but they can have these huge ripple effects throughout a whole society.
Absolutely. And it shows, Narmer, he got it. He understood that real leadership, it's not just about like the big splashy stuff. It's also about sweating the small stuff. It's about those day-to-day things that make a society actually function.
Yeah, no, totally. Okay, so we've got the standard economy, we've got the new system of government. What else? What about security? Because I mean, a unified Egypt, it's still going to have like outside threats to deal with,
Well,
right?
for sure. Unifying your kingdom, that's one thing, but then actually defending it from all the enemies you're inevitably going to make along the way. That's a whole other challenge.
Right.
And Narmer, he knew that. He understood that a strong military, it wasn't just about like going out there and attacking people. It was about deterrence. It was about making it very clear that you were not to be messed with. So he strategically positioned garrisons, he built fortifications, and he made alliances with neighboring regions.
So he's playing like 3D chess over here.
Oh yeah, he was playing the long game. And it worked because it created this atmosphere of strength, of stability.
It's like he's projecting an aura of power.
Yeah.
Like, don't even try it.
Yeah, don't even think about it. And that's something you see again and again throughout history, right? I mean, a strong military, it can be just as effective at preventing wars as it is at winning them. Because when you establish those boundaries, when you project that image of strength, it gives you the breathing room, to actually focus on building up your kingdom, your society.
It's incredible to me that like we're sitting here talking about all this, and this is all happening over 5,000 years ago.
I know, it's mind-blowing.
And the thing is, it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't just some flash in the pan. This really laid the foundation for one of the most influential, longest-lasting civilizations that the world has ever known.
And that's, I think, what really sets apart the great leaders, the visionary leaders from everybody else. It's that they don't just have the ideas, but they do the work.
Yeah.
They put in the time, the energy to actually make those ideas a reality.
Narmer, he wasn't just thinking about the next election cycle, right? He was
Yeah.
thinking generations ahead. And I think that's a good lesson for all of us, no matter, who we are, what we do. It's like, what are we building today? What are we putting out into the world that's going to have that kind of like lasting impact? That's something to think about.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well, Deep Divers, that's all the time we have for today. But this is definitely a conversation that can go on and on. So much to unpack here.
Always.
Until next time.